Justin Trudeau's resignation, the arrival of Donald Trump and his second administration, the tariffs and the threats to Canada's very sovereignty and existence really have been factors that turned the tables and have sent the Liberals back to Ottawa with a fourth straight mandate. All very interesting to my next guest, and delighted to get his perspective because we often wait for it. Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics at the University College Dublin. Good morning, Professor. We are happy to have you back.
Thank you so much for letting me join the party today.
Well, listen, I gave that preamble because that was the storyline that really captured many people in the world. This is a Canadian political story, of course, but it's gone beyond that. It is a remarkable political story to anyone like you who is a student of politics. What do you make of the outcome?
Well, you've got a starting point, which is the dramatic fight back by the Liberals, aided, I have to say, in large part by Donald Trump. In fact, you could almost say this is the third election Donald Trump won, 2 for himself and 1 for Mark Carney. But I think it goes beyond the Liberals being on the verge of that majority in terms of the international significance. And I want to start off with this. Do not underestimate that for many people outside of Canada, I know certainly where I am in Europe, and I know in many places in Asia, Latin America, Canada is now the adult in the room. It is no longer the United States, at least the Trump administration, that if you're looking for stability, if you're looking for the idea of a constructive alliance, a constructive relationship, you go to Ottawa now rather than going to Washington.
That's so interesting because, you might not have heard, sorry, just to interject, in his victory speech, part of what he said was, obviously, they have to have some relationship with the United States, but that Canada will look for reliable partners in Europe and Asia. And if the U.S. does not want to lead, then Canada will lead. He made that reference directly, Professor, last night.
I think that's not just a political slogan. I think that's actually a reality which has already begun, which is sort of a diversification for Canada and for international relationships. In the run-up to this election, you could see, and you'll know the opinion polls about the number
just pause with
who the European Union, economically and financially.
We just lost your audio just for a minute. That's not happened before, Professor. Sorry about that. But pick up in terms of the international significance. I was struck by the fact that there was Germany's election, and now there's been Canada's election. And Donald Trump and his threats and his upending of relationships, he has figured in both of them, and both have been a repudiation to a certain degree of Donald Trump. So how do you see the international significance here, or how the global community will interpret this?
It's really interesting how they're in a wider sense, even beyond Trump, that for many years, I think the media have been saying, oh, well, it's now social media. It's now especially right-wing politics that is in the ascendant. And I never actually thought that was true. I think you have a very mixed position across Europe. You've got central-left governments in places like Scandinavia, for example, in places like Portugal. But I think what has happened is that you've seen the flip side of social media here, that far from it bolstering right-wing movements, that when you have someone represented in particular by Donald Trump, who actually used that to try to destabilize countries, to try to, in effect, break them up. And in the case of Donald Trump trying to take over Canada, people react to that. And they react to that not in terms of a left versus right issue, or in this case, even a liberal versus conservative issue. They react to it in terms of what they feel in terms of being a citizen of their country, a sense of nationalism. And I think that idea of a constructive nationalism, I think that's important for Canada. And I think it's going to be important for other countries to pick up on as well. Dare I say it, with my former home in the UK, where you've had a much more destructive period in politics in recent years, that you can be constructive, you can work with Europe, you can work with other countries. You don't have to descend into this us versus them politics.
So interesting. So a lesson maybe for left of center, both leaders and parties, as they look to the Canadian result. I'm going to play just a little bit of tape for you, Professor, because Mark Carney obviously had to address Donald Trump and dealing with Donald Trump in the United States in his victory speech. This is one of the things that he said, and then we'll discuss it on the other side.
When I sit down with President Trump, it will be to discuss the future economic and security relationship between two sovereign nations. And it will be with our full knowledge that we have many, many other options than the United States to build prosperity for all Canadians. Nous allons renforcer nos relations avec des partenaires
We will
fiables
strengthen our relations with reliable partners in Europe, Asia, and elsewhere. And if the United States no longer wants to be in the forefront of the global economy, Canada will.
We will build one Canadian economy, not 13, with a government committed to free trade in Canada by Canada Day. The point is that we can give ourselves far more than the Americans can ever take away.
So, there's a lot in there, Professor. Sorry, there's a lot of different takes in there. And in fact, just in French, saying what I had mentioned to you earlier. But the point that I wanted to get to you with you is eventually, and it's going to be sooner than later, one would presume, there will be a conversation with Donald Trump. And you heard the basis or the framework for him to go into those conversations. How do you think he should handle the relationship now?
Donald Trump or Mark Carney? Yeah, I mean, Mr. Trump is going to do what Mr. Trump does. And I think what Mark Carney is doing, and I speak of this, by the way, with great respect for Mark Carney in terms of what he did for the Bank of England. It's first of all, you go in there in terms of competence, in terms of knowing the issues, in terms of what's knowing at stake, and in terms of talking about what is possible with a win-win relationship. That Canada does not want an economic war with the United States. It doesn't want a political war with the United States. It wants a cooperative relationship, and I'm sure he'll project that. But at the same time, if Donald Trump is not willing to accept that offer of cooperation, if Donald Trump insists that Canada has to bow down to him and become part of his wannabe empire, then Canadians will not accept that. Mark Carney will not accept it. The Liberal Party will not accept it. Many Canadians from other parties will not accept it. And no amount of white noise from Donald Trump and threats is going to do that. In other words, you extend the hand of friendship, but if that hand of friendship is not reciprocated by Donald Trump, then it is, to take the phrase that I've learned from Canada in the last few months, elbows up.
It reached you there. In Ireland, did it? Elbows up all the way to Professor Lucas. Listen, thank you so much. Always appreciate your perspective. Scott Lucas from University College Dublin.